Welcome to Know Your Candidate podcast. This is an opportunity for candidates from across Tauranga City wards to tell their stories, their experiences, their reasonings in their own words. A format which gives them more than the public debates and profiles that you've seen already. An opportunity for the voter, the ratepayer, future resident to get to know who you want leading the city and, importantly, are they capable of doing so? Anne Pankhurst, a previous business owner, councillor and political junkie, will find out more why the candidates want to run, where they have come from, what they're going to do. So let's not wait anymore. Let's go.
Here talking to Adrienne Pearce from the Arataki ward. Welcome to Know Your Candidate podcast series, Adrienne.
Morena, Anne, on
Morena.
Matariki weekend.
It's
And
indeed.
I was going to go to my gloomy office and I thought, well, let's have a palm tree. That's where we live.
And look how beautiful that sky is. Bright blue. So our format today is to take the opportunity for a longer, more conversational style approach so that you, the candidate, can speak and share your own aspirations for the city. We'll take about 20 to 30 minutes answering pre-prepared questions of which you've got absolutely no idea. And the most important aspect of this is to encourage people to vote. That is it's become our kind of clarion call that we want people to vote. Democracy works when we all engage, actively take part and learn about our candidate. So understand what's important to us for the future of the city. So remember to put this through all of your channels and to then follow us and Know Your Candidate series on the podhub.com. So Adrienne, tell us a bit about you, the rundown on who you are, your children, no children, what you've done in the past. Give us that brief bio on yourself. Build that brand.
Thanks, Anne. Well, I've got my jacket on because honestly, people are recognising it. Men, interesting. I had a little walk around Mawao yesterday and coming off the pathway past the surf club, and a guy stopped me and said, "I've seen you on a billboard." So we had a nice chat. So I'm going to take it off now because look at the weather. And it's wool and I'm expiring. Okay. So I live in Arataki. I think that's an interesting thing. Some people it's important, some people it's not. There's 10 people standing, 4 live in Arataki, 6 don't. Some people are asking me, where do you live? Kind of exactly. Because it's a new ward and so interesting. I love the whole ward thing because I think it gives people that one person that they can contact. So I am from a family of 2, although I do have 96 first cousins. And that's always interesting. Ellen and I are empty nesters. We have 4 children. We have 8 grandchildren. And my background, my friends and family would say that politics is a hobby of mine. I'm interested in the country or where I live, how it operates, city, where we live, how the community operates. I've always been kind of curious and interested. We spent 25 years in Hawke's Bay. I was actually a Hastings District Councillor, Havelock North Ward, for 2 between 2013 and 2017. And then we actually moved to Palmerston North for a job opportunity, I guess you could say. I stood for the National Party in the Palmerston North election. Been 47 years at Labor, so you could call me an optimist. But anyway, we've been ratepayers and had property in Arataki for 2016, and we are now living the dream permanently here.
It's fantastic. You've given us a quick brief in your bio about your local governance. Do you have any other previous governance roles and roughly kind of the size and scale of them?
Well, as a city councillor, Hastings District, I was appointed to an LGNZ, a more Māori focused board. So I was part of that for 4 years. That was around engagement policy for Māori. So that was great. I was appointed to a small business board in, think about this, 2014, 2017. And that was a government-appointed board, small business board, around policy for agencies. There was a group of 12 of us, and I really enjoyed that,
So you've had
helping.
quite a bit of you've had quite a bit of particularly political governance, it sounds like to me, which is great. You're not gonna be
Yes,
shy.
well, I was on the Franchise Association board, Franchise Association New Zealand. That was a number of years because I've built 3 businesses and sold them over the years. 2 of them I franchised. So I was on the Franchise Association board. Like you, was a big fan of the Chamber of Commerce, and
Oh,
I
great.
was a board member, vice president, for something 15 years, maybe a bit longer. People can see the actual details of my governance and volunteering stuff on my website, adrienne.nz. So Chamber of Commerce, the Westpac Business Award judge for a number of years.
Oh, you sound a bit like me.
I read a bit about you, and I was thinking, oh, we'll really get on.
We're sisters.
Sisters, quite right. But I mean, it's so fascinating, isn't it? How businesses develop, who are the people who drive them, lead them. And Hawke's Bay, which is where I was involved in all of that, I mean, we had some big businesses there, Fastway, Rod Drury moved Zero there, well, an office. So, I love all that. I love the whole people aspect of it. It takes courage. Takes courage to start a business, run a business. So my businesses were, the first one was a nursing agency in Hawke's Bay, which kind of morphed into Pause Group, home-based childcare.
Right.
So I had a co-founder in that business.
Right. So what do you consider the main role of the mayor and councillors to be?
Well, it's about our communities. I mean, everyone's talking about that. It's all the catchwords, catchphrases. One thing I'm being really conscious of is not promising anything, because you just can't. You've got to figure out, where the long-term plan is at, where everything's at. So, voters have to choose people that they think can govern a really large multi-billion-dollar business and everything that goes with it. I say to people, there's nothing like a council, there's nothing like local government, because you're working under your own legislation as well as central government legislation, and the numbers are big in Tauranga City.
Very
So
big in Tauranga City.
I think that voters need to really consider that. And this is not a popularity contest. So there's so much talk. I mean, there's a lot of factions around the whole thing. It's like everything. It's the most qualified person for the job who you think will represent you. And, local body, it contact sport to some degree. You're at a table, you're in a 10 group, team of 10. The mayor's got a tough job. He's got to bring people together, and you've all got to come to some kind of consensus, make some judgment calls. Not easy, but you have to choose some people who've got the backbone for it, I guess, because it's tough. People who can't people who can't deal with people not liking them, not being nice to them in the street for whatever reason, maybe this job's not for you.
Adrienne, a skill set that I'd really love to drill down on, and you've kind of covered it quite a bit already, but I'd like to really understand it a bit more, is the ability and experience in managing complex commercial and political environment, given that potentially a large number of people at the table could be new and inexperienced in the local government scene, not necessarily governance, but in that political environment.
Right. Well, it's such a big job, and I think people, there's this whole kind of theory that that people just put their hand up and they seem to get in. Well, the job is hard to get. It's going to be particularly hard this time, of course, because of the numbers of people standing. But I think you have to be able to read and absorb a lot of information, and to be able to make some judgment calls. You actually have to have very good recollection. So a meeting that might have happened 6 months ago, and usually there'll be numbers involved, you need to remember in a way what that number was that was decided. Then 6 months later, it comes back to the table, some work's been done on it. And you always have to be looking for, have those numbers changed? And unless you read and can absorb that kind of information, often the management team are not going to say to you, well, they may or may not, that the numbers have changed somewhat. It may come up at some point. So you really have to be able to do that. Work under pressure, make big decisions, and not be swayed by people. That's the tough one. We live in a small community. Everybody knows everybody. And you have to
That leads me really nicely into another question, is that you make a collective decision, you govern at large and you make a collective decision, which may or may not, it might really annoy your local constituents. So how do you manage that conflict, that you've made a decision, a big decision that is for the greater good, but isn't appealing to your local community?
I think you have to be out in front of that all of the time. So there'll be consultation, there may be some lead up, usually some lead up to the big decisions. So you really have to be advertising it if that's what you're going to do. I quite like this billboard arrangement. We've got so many billboards around the city. And I'd be thinking about that and my kind of, long-term plan change. We're building an Olympic stadium. What do you think? Ring me. So like everything, it's getting people's expectations kind of aligned, or, giving them that honest kind of, could go, a few ways here. I'll be doing my best. However,
right,
when it comes to it, and there are some mechanisms, abstaining, I don't like, being away sick. There are all sorts of mechanisms where, and I think people use them, so you've got to have some courage in this job. You've got to have some backbone to be able to stand by your counsel and say, well, these are the reasons. Yes, I went in with a particular thinking. I'd got the feedback from community, fed into something, but I got to the table, we had to make a decision, and, there was some things that came to the table that actually, it was a good decision to not exactly do what Arataki might have wanted. So, because you have to.
You have to. So if funding for the huge infrastructure spend is one of the biggest issues facing the city, certainly on its books, do you have other solutions or ideas for other solutions that don't include ratepayer revenue?
Okay, so we're looking at 46 projects in the long-term plan, 2024-30 2034, 46 projects. Double checked my number. That's a $4.9 billion spend. Now that's a big problem, in that the income at, today is something like $538 million per annum. So those numbers don't quite equate. The commissioners have done some things, targeted rate, commercial rates. They've made some changes to the rating structure. There's a lot of talk around developers paying more or their fair share. I haven't quite got to the bottom of what that is, because it's a lot of different things to a lot of people. But if the reality is they're not paying what they should be paying, as I say, debatable, not my opinion, because I don't have all those numbers. So there could be some more income there. That public-private kind of combination, I like that one. I think a lot of cities are really using that quite well. Government, this city deal, a new kind of policy coming through. What does it mean? Nobody seems to quite have their head around that. And there's that whole theory around, we should get more of our GST back. We should get more of this, that, and the next thing back from government. And to be fair to the government of today, they are looking at those mechanisms. They understand that, local councils just can't foot these massive infrastructure bills. So this is good.
Right.
Did that answer the question?
Yes. No, I'm just looking to sort of get a sense of, exactly as we've both said, you can't rely forever more on the ratepayer to fund this intense growth that we've got. It's not going to be affordable for either party. The city council's debt ceiling is pretty well, our debt is
nearly there
against it.
Yeah.
So we've got to be thinking, and we can't say, well, we're not going to build more roads or sewage or water, or that is also not an option. So we've got a whole lot of options that we can't meet. And
yes.
So we have to be thinking laterally about what those other. So it's just really understanding that.
Yeah.
That the candidate.
So the first. Sorry.
No, you go.
So the first job that has to be done is, once you've got that, councillors have got their feet under the table, there'll be quite a bit of orientation, I assume. Hopefully they'll put some training mechanisms in fast for people who, it can take people up to a year or more to really get their heads around how this thing works. And this is so transitional, this council. I think voters need to think about that. They need to think about it, and maybe get a bit of experience this time around. Possibly people who have been at the table before might have learnt some lessons. I'm pretty agnostic on all of that. It's the knowledge of how council works is what's going to really be needed in this first term, 4 years.
So I'd really like to ask, you're going to have a whole lot of competing interests, and we've kind of discussed that and covered it, like reasonable rates, new funding models, infrastructure, deficit and debt. How do you choose between investing in growth versus rate relief where there is a lot of angst?
Well, it's really about, spending what ratepayers or what the city can afford. We all want stuff. I'd like a Porsche or something. Doesn't mean I'm going to get it. And it's really about, and I think it's as basic as that, in a way. If people on Papamoa Beach Road are paying $5,500, $6,000 a year in rates, how much are you going to push those rates up? 10,000? Are we going to make the city unaffordable well, a lot of people are saying now it's unaffordable. So we have to think of ways, and, we might not be able to have everything we want. Yes, we want to be a world-class city, but, we're 161,000 people. we're small in the scheme of things. What are we in New Zealand? Fifth.
Fifth, yeah.
Yeah,
So
fifth.
yeah.
And we want to be, I suppose that's the other thing, do we want to be big city slickers? What do we think we really kind of need if we can't afford to have all the bells and whistles? And that'll be the new council. I think it's their first job, their first item of business is to go through that long-term plan. Because,
So I'm really interested in your reaction to the thought that Tauranga is a critical part of New Zealand Inc. and that we have to think more nationally than locally because what happens here matters.
Yes. Well, it does matter because of the port, because our horticultural kind of, industry, we are the kiwi fruit capital of the world. There's a lot of moving parts. And people want to come here for jobs, but housing is so expensive. It just all goes together. So the government, is going to have to help the city to do what the city wants to do. There's been talk about what kind of Auckland's done. Wayne Brown said, you can have this if you pay this much rate. You can have this if you pay this much rate. You can have this if you pay that much rate. All sorts of different ways of trying to, say to ratepayers, these are the decisions we have to make. And unfortunately, it does come down to money, and we can only borrow X amount. Nobody likes to sell anything, so we're on that kind of seesaw. But we have some big issues. We've got a clean air problem down at the Mount. What comes first? What's the priorities? And everybody that sits down at that table is going to have different priorities.
Which leads nicely into a question that I'd like to ask you, is that you are sitting at a table of quite diverse people, all with their own agendas and priorities and thoughts. And how do you work in a team that is quite different from each other? What skills and attributes do you bring to that?
Well, I'd like to think I work pretty well in a team. It's all about, lobbying is a bad word, but in a way, but it's all about stating your views in an understandable way for people to think, well, actually, and all of us, every single one of us, we don't know what we don't know. I went to the clean air meeting. Wow. I knew there was a bit of a problem, but that is a big problem. But, it's scary. So all that heavy industrial, what are we going to do with it? Who wants to mess with the port? That's the golden egg. And we've got our airport, how can we make that more kind of profitable, I guess? Is there an income stream there? Then we've got the cruise ships, what's going to happen there next season. Our cities, our suburbs, the Mount, Greaton. Is it all about the CBD? Don't know.
Well, Adrienne, it's been wonderful to talk to you, and thank you very much. And I hope the jacket continues to work for you. Remember to encourage people to vote, to share your podcast through your own channels and database, and to follow us on thepodhub.com. Again, thank you very much, and it's been lovely to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Anne. Hope to see you about.
I'm sure you will. Bye-bye.
Tune in to the next episode of Know Your Candidate to be informed on who you want to run your city. Got feedback and like to comment your thoughts on the episode? Connect with Know Your Candidate on social. This has been the podhub.com experience. Check out thepodhub.com for other podcasts and how you can even do your own.